Christian McCaffrey, well, today was the first day of mandatory minicamp, and we'll go over a couple of the stars that were missing and some still are missing. But one that wasn't missing anymore was Christian McCaffrey, who just signed a brand new contract extension. Very exciting. He's going to be averaging about $19 million a year. Is it $38 million extension? A lot of money for a running back. He's going to be making $19 million when he's age 31, which, see, I was anticipating that they would guarantee the money that he had left, because for people who don't know, Christian McCaffrey did have 2 years left on his deal, but zero guaranteed money. So it made sense that he was holding out up until this point, just because with the production he's had, and the 49ers have been known not only with their stars, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa, but if you go all the way back to Raheem Mostert, they ended up giving him a contract extension after his ginormous production year. So it made sense that Christian McCaffrey would want that money that was not guaranteed to be guaranteed, because if he were to get injured, he was in a position where they could cut him for zero loss. And that's just not fair to the player he's been. Obviously, you don't want to pay someone for what they've done for you in the past, but I like Kyle. We'll get into it more, but Kyle Shanahan spoke today, and he spoke a lot to Christian McCaffrey's character and basically saying that he expects this level of production to continue even in a later age, where potentially if his body's breaking down, it'll be nothing to do with like within Christian McCaffrey's control. He will be doing everything mindset and physical wise to put himself in the best position. He's obviously also just been a great spokesperson for the 49ers. Honestly, just a slam dunk trade. And a huge reason that it was slam dunk is because he's been able to stay healthy. Like, I think everyone already knew he had this type of player in him, but the fact that he stayed healthy so far has been incredible. What do you think about the extra 2 years that are added on to what Christian McCaffrey continued to have? Because like I said, it's going into year 30 or age 30 and 31, which, although not old in the world, is a little bit older for running backs. Chris McCaffrey did touch on that himself, and I know there's some outliers. I think Derrick Henry might be in his early 30s right now. So, but yeah, what was your immediate takeaway?
I think this tells you there's a good chance that Christian McCaffrey retires as a 49er. But as you said, I mean, we're talking about Christian McCaffrey here. So being 30, 31 at the end of this contract, he might still play a couple years after that because he's such a freak of nature. And one thing that Kyle Shanahan said in his presser today actually, struck me. And he said Christian McCaffrey is going to be, I think, trying to find like the correct word he used, because I don't want to misquote him. Let me see if I could actually find the quote. Something like he's going to be good until he decides like not to be, or something like that.
Yes.
Which is like very much like, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, yeah, I mean, Christian McCaffrey, I think, is going to be good as long as he wants to be. And I think if we know anything about Christian McCaffrey, he's going to be good for a long time. So probably beyond this contract even. I mean, he deserves it, right? You mentioned like this is a massive contract for a running back, but I think we know he's much more than a running back, especially to this team and how they've used him. You mentioned the fact that he's been able to stay healthy. And so I think that's why there's no hesitation in giving him the guaranteed money as well. I think he deserves it. It's hard to argue against him deserving more money. And even so, like, I still think you can make the case that he's underpaid, but, just because he's a running back, we'll leave that as it is, right?
Which Kyle Shanahan kind of even addressed that, right? When he said, like, it was kind of easy to get the deal done because he is a running back. Making him the highest paid running back is still such a lower number than if we're talking about wide receivers, quarterbacks, defensive ends.
Yeah, it's a bargain. And another thing with this deal, like the 49ers were able to bring his cap hit for 2024 down. I think it's a savings of 7.46 million of cap hit for this year for McCaffrey. And so again, like this just speaks to the 49ers and how they're able to structure these contracts in a similar fashion all the time, like staggering out the payments while still keeping the player happy, right? I mean, we talked about McCaffrey's getting his guarantees. He's going to get his roster bonus. So he's good there. But now it's spread out through a much favorable, team-friendly manner that I think will make things a little bit easier for the 49ers in the next few years cap-wise. So, I mean, it's a win-win, really.
Okay, so I was looking for that quote that you were talking about with Kyle Shanahan, and he was basically asked, with running backs being known to lose a step in their older age, how do you feel about paying Christian McCaffrey an average of $19 million, even his 31 seasons? And Kyle Shanahan goes on to say that with Christian McCaffrey's personality, he's not worried about him being a good running back until his 30s. Someone is calling me. Sorry. He's not worried about him being a good running back until his 30s. He will be a good player until he decides not to be. His preparation and what he does to get ready for his performance on the field, his mental game, and his awareness of his body will help him succeed even in the later years, which I kind of understand what he's saying. I think, and Mr. Corey makes a good comment, and I know Larry Krueger asked Kyle Shanahan, hey, Christian McCaffrey got a ton of targets. He said the exact number. I don't have that right now, but a ton of targets last year. How do you anticipate that going on as he gets older? And Kyle Shanahan did say that potentially he'd like to lessen his running back targets. He did talk about his wide receiving targets being kind of one of those things that's a last resort. And so he's happy that Christian McCaffrey got those, because that means there was at least someone on the field that was getting open when maybe Brock Purdy couldn't get the ball to someone else. So I can understand that. But I like how he kind of said, maybe right now we've heard reports of Christian McCaffrey doesn't want to get off the field. He wants to go 100%. But maybe with age, because like I said, Kyle Shanahan pointed out that awareness of his body and that preparation of his body. Maybe Christian will kind of be able to pull himself back. Now, we haven't seen that, but we also haven't seen him, in those later ages. So maybe that is something he'll be able to do. And maybe we might see a transition of the majority of the targets, number one target in the offense, to a guy who still is running the ball, but is also a coach on the field. I know that the wide receivers coach, I'm blanking on his name, but last week when they had practice, someone asked him, oh, isn't it good that Brandon Ayuk isn't here? Because now Ricky can get more targets and Jacob Cowan can get more targets. And he said, well, yeah, it's nice they can get more targets, but they don't have that example. Having someone like Christian McCaffrey on the field, even if he's not getting the number one targets, he's going to set that standard and be a great voice, even if he's not getting 30 targets a game, he's getting 15 at the end of it. He's going to make the room better, which is going to be important. Also, fans have to remember, and I have to remember, that the salary cap is going to go up. Now, when you were talking about how it's structured, it is something like, isn't it like 7 to 8 million? And then his last one is like 27. So that's going to be a big jump that could be an area of concern later on. We've seen that with Eric Armstead and some other guys, but also maybe it's something that if Christian McCaffrey is still able to be on the field, we've also seen guys who have had that big salary cap. I think George Kittle had something similar a few years ago, and they've transitioned a lot of that money into bonuses and pushed it down the road and then ended up spreading it out because they extended them for longer. So just because right now it says, I think it's in 27, it's about, is it $27 million in 2027?
It's 27.461. Yeah.
But what we could see, say at 31, because I think Derek Hunt is, I don't want to speculate but I think Derrick Henry is a little bit older than 31 right now. If McCaffrey is still able to go, maybe we see something where they add 2 more years on, because you're talking about he could potentially retire a 49er, and they just spread that out. And McCaffrey seems like a person who is reasonable enough that if he's not continuing this level of production, he might not be like, you need to give me even more, but they can just draw out that last year. These are obviously speculations, but I'm just saying I've seen a lot, at least on Twitter, of people being like, well, yeah, but there's going to be this giant dead cap. And there's just a couple things to combat that is, one, the salary cap is going to go up. And two, just because it says that now, we've seen plenty of players where they've reworked that last year of their deal, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a way that maybe wasn't so tasteful, because I know that people point to that Eric Armstead one as one that was maybe less advantageous. But I don't see a problem with it, especially if he stays healthy. And I think Niner Gang was in here, and he said, to be honest, I wasn't a fan of the trade, but Christian McCaffrey made me a believer. When I first heard the trade, immediately I felt excitement. And then I had the same really struggled with injury. 49ers have problems with guys who struggle with injury. I don't think anyone can look at this deal and say it hasn't, or that trade and say it hasn't been anything but a slam dunk. If Christian McCaffrey stays healthy the next couple of years, they're underpaying him. You know what I mean? For what, not only for this upcoming year, but for the years. If he is making $19 million in 2 years and having a similar, even if he goes down a little bit, a similar level of production, he's getting hugely underpaid. I don't know. I think I'm very happy that a guy like that is going to be on the team. I'm excited about it. When I first saw it and saw him holding out, I was thinking, I don't know how much I would add to that. Maybe just guarantee the 2 years that he already has. But seeing how it's structured, knowing that it frees up room for them to extend Brandon Ayuk, if that is something that they want to do, which I think it is. By the way, do you want to maybe touch on that? Because I saw you talking about that with Kyle Posey on Twitter, and I know some people had the reaction, oh, this takes away money from Brandon Ayuk, but that's actually not the case. It actually makes it more likely that they're going to extend Brandon Ayuk, right? So, or at least they have the possibility.
It just means there's more possibility they can afford Brandon Ayuk. Now, whether they actually get this deal done, we won't know until it happens, but they'll certainly be able to afford him. So, that's the thing that happens every time the 49ers sign someone else. It's like, oh my God, this means they won't be able to sign X, Y, and Z. And it was the same thing when they signed Juwan Jennings to his extension. It was like, oh my God, they're not going to be able to pay Brandon Ayuk too. Like, there's just no way. Debo's already on his deal. There's no way they can pay Brandon Ayuk as well, which, like, they can have them on the same roster together, at least for 2024. I know, like, after that, there's probably some indication that they won't continue on the same team if both Ayuk and Debo are on extensions. But, the point stands that, when the 49ers do these extensions, the way they're structured is that the first year is always a low cap hit. Like, that's just how they've done all these contracts. And then it kind of incrementally, grows. It's usually the third or fourth year that, it grows exponentially. But by then, the cap is probably going to be at a higher number. And there's ways that even if you get to that point and it's still pretty high for your liking, you can restructure. So, like, cross that bridge when you get to it. The 49ers do a great job of staggering out the contracts. So again, like, this is just another example of when you hear the initial numbers of these contracts, you have to wait for the final numbers. You have to wait for the details of how they're structured, because how they're structured tells us way more about what the player is getting paid and how much the team can afford in other areas. So I guess people jump to the conclusions. I've been guilty of that in the past as well, but now okay, great for you. But now I just wait, I wait till I see the final numbers. This stands true for even, like, other players' contracts, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, for example, like his deal when that first came out, it was like, oh my God, that deal's crazy. Like 49ers can't afford to pay Brandon Ayuk that much money. And then like final details came out and it was like, oh, actually, like it's not that bad. He's not actually getting paid that much. Like, so I always wait to see the details, and the details for Juwan Jennings' contract and Christian McCaffrey's extension, like both are really good, favorable. 49ers should be able to afford a Brandon Ayuk contract, no problem.